I'm Corbett Wall with DVAuction, here with the cattle market summary for the week ending April the 3rd. We had continued resurgence of all cattle markets and good demand at every level. Feeder cattle, those going right into the feedlot, sold steady to $4 higher with spots as much as $6 higher, and that was mostly on heifers. Stocker cattle and calves were more uneven and sold steady to $5 higher, but for the most part, your feeder cattle, your feedlot replacement cattle, really outdid your stocker cattle again, right in the face of this green grass that's coming. But most of your bigger grazing operations, your bigger outfits that send the orders down in the southeast and places like that, they mostly got their needs filled for their stocker cattle. They've really pulled back on those. You're just not seeing many light cattle when you get out into the central portions of the U.S. And the ones you do see are new crop calves, and a lot of those got enough size to them, they're just going to go right on to feed anyway. But feeder cattle really showed good strength there, and it's coming off of the strength that the fat cattle has showed the last few weeks. Your stable CME markets that aren't nearly as volatile as they were there right before and right after the new year. And we're seeing a lot more open interest in there, and there's just a lot more contracts, and it's not swaying back and forth near as much. And then this week we had corn stocks showing that got a little more corn on hand than we thought, so probably looking into dropping that corn market, or at least not seeing it jump up right away. But it won't be long before we're into a deal on the corn market where it's just all about the weather and how much of it they got planted and things like that. But really haven't seen much planting yet. A lot of guys putting on fertilizer, anhydrous, stuff like that, but it won't be long before we get full swing corn planting season. But most of your yearling feeder cattle that were on offer this week were coming out of some type of a growing lot, which really showed that the market had more strength than what it appeared just on your trends, because most of those growing lot yearlings are a lot fleshier, not nearly as attractive to the buyers, and we're just not seeing that many green cattle right now. The only kind of forage we'd be coming off of is wheat, and we're sitting right in the lull in between your normal term wheat pasture grazing and then your graze outs, which won't come for several weeks now. But this week, you know, we saw here just a few weeks ago, I was wondering if 800-pound steer would be able to hold $2. Well, nearly all of them are deep into the $2 now. This week, Burwell, Nebraska, the Burwell livestock market, had a load of steers weighed 803, bring $225. That's how deep we've gotten into the $2 on the 800-pound steers, and we're seeing heifers getting up to the $2 point on 800-pound heifer now. At Nebraska livestock sales, Norfolk, Nebraska, there had a big load, a big Nebraska load of 790-pound heifers, bring $202.75. So that's a huge spread in there, and those weren't comparing, you know, apples to apples on those steers and heifers, but we're seeing some 800-pound heifers bring around $2 now on a high market, and we're up to $220 plus on some 800-pound steers. That's a huge steer heifer discount, but we saw that narrow just a tick this week as we saw a higher trend in many places for heifers, as guys are turning to heifers to try to get something that'll kind of have a better chance of making money. But we saw rains in several major places that have a lot of grazing. We saw Oklahoma had a lot of rain come through. Parts of Kansas had a lot of rain. Kentucky got flooded again. They've had the worst weather the last 6 months of any place there is, except for Boston maybe. But, you know, they had a lot of snow and ice there in Kentucky, and they had flooding rains this week, and they've just really had a hard time. And hopefully in about a month, everything will be bright for the Kentucky Derby. But the Flint Hills and places like that got some good rain, except for those winds, those high winds that they always get in the southern plains this time of year is just sapping all that moisture. Your Flint Hills did get enough moisture where they could kind of burn that off, which almost everybody does, gets that old last year's growth out of there, and then that blue stem really comes up right out of those ashes and just explodes. But you're noticing on, like on the Kansas Turnpike I traveled at this week, you know, the east side of the turnpike was all burnt, but the west side wasn't, because if they tried to burn the west side, it would shut the highway down because they just have no cooperation with the wind. But your big outfits are about done buying their cattle to turn out. You got a lot more flexibility on your smaller backgrounders. They're still picking around, and they're not as quite as choosy. They'll buy some new crop calves, but we're just not seeing any of those old croppers, those calf weight yearlings, those real rugged type cattle that they like to turn out in those big widespread grazing areas. Those cattle are long gone now, and just some new crop fallborns making to the market. Your auction receipts on everything, on feeders and stockers and cows and bulls, is really slow, and it's on the downhill slide, and it's just going to continue to dwindle, and then by the time we get to Memorial Day, the auctions will really be slow and be that way all summer, or not all summer, but up till mid part of the summer. We'll start seeing a lot of those double stock yearlings come to market, but a lot of those won't go to the sale barn. They mostly sell direct because they're in big load lot pastures out there. But you probably see more people hang on to those cattle until they're ready to ship, rather than to contract them early like they normally do, because they just left so much money on the table last year if they sold much too early. But your fat cattle really making strides this week. They've made strides the last several weeks. You know, we never dreamed that we'd be getting close to the record highs again. We're tickling it right now. Your live sales are mostly $2 higher this week, from 167 to 169. Dress sales 2 to 3 higher, 265 to 267. You know, that all-time record high, we had a few live sales there at 174. We're getting pretty close to that. Actually, in Iowa, which is the most active of the 5 areas, had some 170 confirmed sales this week. So we're really getting close to that. It's funny, Iowa was always a stepchild when we had a lot of negotiated trade. Now it's the most active of the 5 areas because you have so many independent farmer feeders that aren't contracted or anything, and you see that they've got a lot more leverage and they can trade, and they get the high about every week now. Check out DVAuction for your for a regular weekly auction market in your area. Still got a lot of bull sales, production sales coming through, like the Windmill Angus sale this Monday in Nebraska there. Check out DVAuction and see what all they have to offer. For this report and more information, check out the stockexchangenews.com. And from my DVAuction home office here in Maysville, Missouri, we'll talk to you next week.